Disclaimers kill me on the inside, but there is a minority that need them, and someone still had a meltdown after part 1's disclaimer. You goddamn delicate muffin. So disclaimer, this is a video about sex and prostitution, so there will be talk about sex and prostitution and non-consensual sex or rape. Sometimes these women are called whores in this video, as they are in the books. I will be using the term whore and prostitute interchangeably. I guess I have to clarify, I have nothing against prostitutes, and nothing in this video is trying to be cruel to them or say they're wrong, as we're in a day and age where everyone is offended because the vocabulary or phrasing they would like isn't used. If you are easily offended or have some problem with people having sex or sex for money, please don't watch this video. Everyone else, let's have fun and talk about a series we love, like goddamn beautiful, majestic, rational adults. In part 1, I talked about the type of prostitutes you can find in the Seven Kingdoms, their price, and somewhat of the stigma against them. This video, I want to talk more about how whores are viewed in the Seven Kingdoms, the exceptions, and how they actually benefit the realm. In part 3, I will finally get to Essos and other areas of the world of ice and fire. So last video I left off with the Iron Islands and their thought that even being a basically sex slave to one man is better than being a prostitute. I mean, Euron Greyjoy considers his sons base-born mongrels because they're born from whores despite the whore's birth. Euron says that even though they are from his body, so are the contents of his chamber pot. So Euron basically compares his children with whores to his piss and bowel movements. But how prostitutes are perceived in the Seven Kingdoms gets much, much worse. Worse than comparing your children to piss and shit. I know it's hard to believe. There is a stereotype in the Seven Kingdoms that whores are not intelligent, nor do they have common sense. Often the sentences, stupid slut or shut up slut, can be heard in the Seven Kingdoms when a prostitute tries to give her 2 cents. There's a saying that there are stereotypes for a reason, and the belief whores in the Seven Kingdoms aren't the most intelligent does have some truth to it. Whores that can read and write and have an education are rare, which makes sense as the nobles are generally the ones that are educated. So along with prostitutes, the small folk have the same level of education. Despite the reputation of not having common sense, Shay, a whore, claims that they do have the ability to see a man, not his dress, to keep themselves safe, which requires a bit of common sense to do. Street smarts is a thing these people would want to have if they wanted to stay alive. There's other unfavorable generalizations about prostitutes of the Seven Kingdoms. It's said that dockside whores laugh loudly. Littlefinger, who runs multiple brothels, claims that whores love to gossip. Stannis considers goat milk to be better than a whore's breast milk. Tyrion thinks, in the many whores that he has seen, that they seldom have dignity or elegance. Of course, Tyrion also told people whores won't kiss you, they'll fuck you blind, but you'll never feel their lips on yours. Which that isn't always true. However, from these generalizations, we can learn more about their typical behavior and dress, such as when Balon catches Theon wearing a necklace he bought, and he rips it off his son, telling him, "I will not have my son bedeck himself like a whore." So we can assume some whores wear jewelry. Some of them wear a lot of jewelry. Due to society viewing them as beneath most people, whores are often the center of cruel insults or ways to describe a situation, such as saying during a fight, "This will be uglier than a whore's ass." Now, maybe this person had poor interactions with whores or couldn't afford a nicer one, but Jon Snow agrees with the assessment. Calling someone a whore's son is also a slap in the face in the Seven Kingdoms. They also have a saying in their world that is used for an individual that doesn't have perhaps the best reputation. They say, "They're colder than a maiden and crueler than a whore." Then there's the semi-frequent comparison of saying something smells worse than an unwashed or old whore. There's also a thing in this world about calling a woman a whore despite not exactly meeting the requirements for that classification as a way to insult her. During fights, men would at times call Brienne of Tarth a whore. Robert Baratheon calls Daenerys Targaryen a whore after he hears news of her being pregnant. As she was married at the time and was pregnant by her own husband, it doesn't make her a whore, but Robert is simply using it as an insult because he's furious she is alive and breeding. Her own brother Viserys also calls Daenerys a whore when angry at her. When Lord Commander Jon Snow re-garrisons Long Barrow, a castle at the Wall, with spearwives under the command of men of the Night's Watch, the Black brothers start calling it Whore's Barrow, despite the wildling spearwives not traditionally being whores. Really, the people of the Seven Kingdoms might just be confused on the technicalities of what constitutes a whore, but again, likely they're just using it to be insulting. Such as when some small folk call Cersei a whore and Kingslayer's whore. However, the likelihood of Jaime paying for her body is pretty low. If all that wasn't bad enough, there's not much job safety for you, and justice for a prostitute should a noble decide you're guilty of something doesn't often come. Such as Lord Tarly, who sentences a whore that gave 4 of his soldiers the pox to have her private parts washed out with lye, a strong chemical, and thrown in a dungeon. Being inside a brothel is safer, but violence towards you, it can still occur very easily, which is where that common sense and learning to read a person comes in. Gregor Clegane knocked out the teeth of a prostitute named Pia and broke her nose when she spoke when he wanted quiet. Really, being viewed as less than a person by people and at the mercy of people you don't know can be a recipe for disaster, which is why many workers choose the protection of a brothel. If a sex worker eventually decides that they don't want that life anymore, it can be incredibly difficult to get out of that situation. While prostitutes can certainly marry and or move to a higher status in the Seven Kingdoms, it is incredibly difficult. Chances are the stigma of your past occupation will stay with you. An example of this is Satin. Satin was born and raised in a brothel in Old Town, where he eventually worked as a whore. In his later teens, which his age is still up to debate, he was recruited to the Night's Watch, where he is shown to be useful, quick, clever, and able to partially read and write. Upon completing his training, he becomes a steward of the Night's Watch. After Jon Snow becomes the Lord Commander and is in need of a new steward, he elects Satin. This is not met well by the other members of the Night's Watch, who feel a former prostitute should not be a personal steward of the Lord Commander. So despite becoming a Black Brother, which is supposed to wipe away your past, the men still refuse to wipe away the supposed stain on Satin's past, and they continue to judge him for it, further showing how much prostitution is looked down on in the Seven Kingdoms. But it's important to point out that not everyone agrees with that. Jon Snow states, "Whatever Satin may have done in Old Town, he is our brother now, and he will be my squire." But despite the Lord Commander sticking up for him, Satin knows his position, and during the wedding of Alice Karstark, he dances with serving girls but does not approach any highborn ladies in order to not offend anyone. There's also the chance that a whore could lie and marry a knight or someone higher up, but Tyrion thinks that if the person should learn the truth, it wouldn't be good for the whore. While it is sad these workers are treated this way, it is even sadder when an individual that had no choice has to live with that stigma. Sometimes women in the Seven Kingdoms have no choice but to become a prostitute. If they are small folk and have no family to turn to, such as an only male relative dying or deciding he won't care for them, they may now have no choice but to become a prostitute. Then there are times a woman may be forced into simulating the role of a whore. An example of this is the innkeeper's daughter Laena, where Clegane pays a silver for her, rapes her, and then has his men take a turn. While that was definitely rape, she will carry that event with her and may be judged by others to be a whore if they found out. Another absolutely terrible situation of rape, where the woman was forced to play the role of a prostitute, was Tyrion's wife Tysha. When Tywin found out his son had married a commoner, he forced his men and Tyrion to rape her and throw coins at her, effectively treating her like a prostitute. However, again, in these situations, the women are not actually a whore, simply the victim of rape and sexual violence, despite what the men raping her may say. But they still might have the stigmas placed on prostitutes on themselves because of the situation. Then there are women that were definitely whores but then lied and said a man made them, such as Shae at Tyrion's trial. She states that she was to be married to a squire before Tyrion put him at the front rank of the van and killed him, and after he was killed, Tyrion forced her to become a whore for him. But we know Shae was a whore before Tyrion began having sex with her. There's also cases of mistaken identity, such as when Brienne is mistaken for being a whore by the master of the Galltown Girl. However, despite all that, there is one location in the Seven Kingdoms that prostitutes might be treated with much more respect, or respect in general, and that is Dorne. While this can't be known for certain, we know Dorne has a more relaxed view on sex and mistresses. In Dorne, having a paramour, an unmarried lover, is accepted and gives you a degree of social status. Many lords, and some ladies, in this area have them, regardless of being married, for love and lust, but not for having children with or to form alliances. Though of course they can and do have children with paramours. Bastards of such unions aren't frowned upon like they are in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Dorne is also relaxed about homosexuality, and having a paramour of the same sex isn't considered odd. With Dorne's more relaxed view on sex and mistresses, it's likely whores in that area are treated with more respect and aren't considered the bottom of society. And even if they are, they're probably treated a lot better than they are in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. A prince of Dorne, Oberyn Martell, even has a daughter, Obara, with an old town whore. His daughter is friends with the Princess of Dorne, his brother Doran's daughter, and many respect her. Of course, him being a Prince of Dorne might make a little bit of difference in this situation. Despite this outlook on paramours, elsewhere in the Seven Kingdoms, these women are more times than not referred to as whores. As an example, when Ellaria Sand, Oberyn's paramour, comes to King's Landing, the Queen of Thorns calls her the Serpent's Whore. So even though they are thought of so negatively in most of the Seven Kingdoms, minus Dorne, whores do have a role in the Seven Kingdoms society. They help the economy and, according to some, keep the men from raping, which is a whole other thing, and you can likely guess who said that. Everyone's favorite Mad Queen, Cersei. Cersei claims that if there were no brothels in King's Landing, the ships would go to Duskendale or Gulltown instead. She also states that brothels pay money that helps pay the wages of the Gold Cloaks and builds ships to defend the shores. In very recent Seven Kingdoms history, a penny tax was placed on prostitution by Tywin Lannister in the hopes to improve public morale and raise funds for Joffrey's upcoming wedding. So clearly prostitution in King's Landing helps maintain the city. This same relationship would occur in other cities as well. I want to end this video talking about the kings that had no problem using prostitution. So there were kings that definitely liked prostitutes and saw no shame in using them. Aegon IV Targaryen and Robert Baratheon both slept with countless whores and frequented brothels and did not care what anyone thought, even when others tried to get them to hide the visits. Their frequent use of prostitutes did mar their reputation, though they both had some other not so great things going on during their rule. But the numerous prostitutes didn't help their image. A prophet from the Begging Brothers claimed that the whoremonger, King Robert, was brought low by the gods for his ways. Probably my favorite prostitute in Westeros is Bella, who claims to be a bastard of Robert Baratheon, possibly during Robert's rebellion when he hid in the Stony Sept during the Battle of the Bells, a battle she is named after. So that is all the information on prostitution in the Seven Kingdoms. There isn't a lot of information on prostitution above the wall with the free folk, but as they are a lot more lax about sex like Dorne, it probably doesn't have the same stigma as the Seven Kingdoms. In the last part of this series, I will talk about prostitution in Essos, where things actually get a bit trickier and a lot muddier. And then some of the other areas of the World of Ice and Fire, I'll talk about how they treat prostitution as well. So thank you so much for watching. Please like the video and come back, and thank you so much for being on this channel and talking about this awesome stuff with me. It excites me so much, you have no idea.